Look at him, 40 years old and still begging scraps like a dog. No wonder Dad never trusted you with anything, my younger brother Daniel sneered across the crowded living room. His voice pitched loud enough for the cousins and old neighbors to hear, and I felt the ripple of laughter hit me like a slap. Worse because it happened right there in front of my wife, Emily, who bit her lip hard but couldn't stop her cheeks from coloring. And I knew she hated pity almost as much as I did, but it was already too late because every pair of eyes had swung to me, waiting for my reaction, and I couldn't stop the heat that surged into my chest. Couldn't stop the tiny tremor that shook my hand as I set down the plate of Mom's pecan pie. Damn pie, always a symbol of home, of holidays, of fairness and family, that now looked like some mocking trophy in Daniel's hand as he raised his slice in a mock toast to my failure. And I wanted to choke him right there, but instead I forced myself to breathe, to steady, to remember that my name is Michael Reed. I'm 42 years old from Dayton, Ohio, and no matter how much they laugh, I've got something none of them can see yet, something I've kept hidden for years, an advantage locked up so tight even Daniel's smug smile can't touch it. Though tonight I feel it thrumming inside me like a live wire waiting for the right moment. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that timing decides whether a man dies forgotten or lives long enough to carve justice into stone. So I swallowed, let his words hang, let the room lean toward me, and when my Uncle Hank muttered, "Guess the will speaks for itself," I felt the sting twist deeper because that was the first time anyone said it out loud. Dad had signed everything over to Daniel, the house, the business, even the lake cabin I built half the damn deck on, and me, the elder son, the one who stayed through Dad's chemo rounds, the one who drove Mom to church when she couldn't walk, the one who bent my own career into knots, just to be around, got nothing but a line in the will calling me self-sufficient. Like it was a curse word, like ambition meant I deserved to be gutted in front of my family. And the worst part was watching Emily's eyes, God. She tried to hide it, but I saw the flicker of doubt, the question of whether she'd married the wrong brother. Because Daniel with his polished shoes and easy smirk looked like the man with everything while I stood with nothing. And when he clapped his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Mike, maybe you can come work for me now." The laughter that rolled through the room had teeth, and every one of them cut me. But I clenched my jaw and stayed still because rage without patience is just self-destruction. And I'd already made that mistake once in my 20s when I swung at a boss in a bar and lost a job I loved, so I knew better now. And when my cousin snapped a photo of Daniel smirking beside me, posting it to some family group with a caption I didn't want to read, I realized this humiliation wasn't ending tonight. It was going digital, viral in its own small-town way. The screenshots bouncing around before I even left the house, my failure becoming a meme in the very family I'd bled for, and that's when I excused myself, stepped outside into the December air sharp as glass, and let the cold fill my lungs while Emily stayed inside, torn between following me and protecting her own fragile dignity. And I leaned on the porch rail that I once painted with Dad before Daniel ever learned how to hold a brush, and I thought about the pie again. The pecan pie Mom swore was the recipe she'd passed down to both of us, but now Daniel held it like he held the rest of the inheritance, flaunting it as if he'd earned it, and I knew then that pie wasn't just dessert anymore. It was the symbol of everything stolen, and I promised myself that when the time came that pie, or what it represented, would be the weapon that cut him down. Not my fists, not my anger, but something colder, sharper, more final, and I swear to God I almost smiled thinking about it. Because sometimes a man doesn't need to swing to draw blood. Sometimes he just needs to wait until the crowd leans close. And then twist the knife they didn't even see him carrying, and the thought calmed me enough to walk back inside, to watch Daniel hold court like some king while Mom's friends praised him for stepping up. And I sat in silence until my phone buzzed and I saw the first group chat message, a screenshot of Daniel's smug post. "Guess who got everything?" With me in the background looking stunned, and beneath it, a string of laughing emojis from cousins I once bailed out of bar fights, and my chest locked tight until Emily reached for my hand under the table, squeezing once, and though she didn't speak, her eyes told me she wanted me to fight, not with fists, but with something that couldn't be erased, and that's when my plan, the one I'd hidden even from myself, started knitting together, piece by piece, as Daniel poured bourbon like he was already king, as the family clapped him on the back, as I let them write me off. And in that moment, I knew letting them believe I was powerless was the greatest camouflage I could ever wear. Because if they saw even a glimpse of what was coming, they'd scatter like roaches before the light, and I wasn't ready yet. Not until I could make every step count. And so I let my brother savor his win, let him stack the cards high, because the higher the tower, the sweeter the collapse when one quiet move takes it all down. and I swear I felt my heart slow, steady, a predator's rhythm, as I lifted my glass and toasted with him, whispering to myself, "One day soon, Daniel, you'll choke on that pie." And when I caught Emily's eye across the rim, I think she understood enough to trust me, though trust was fragile as ice at that table, ready to crack with the wrong weight. And so I smiled, the first real smile of the night, because I wasn't beaten yet, and I leaned back as if none of it mattered, letting them laugh while the quiet machinery of revenge began turning. Each gear precise, each shadow waiting, and that's when I'll pause here to tell you something that matters before we get deeper into this story. Make sure you're subscribed and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Because what happened after that toast wasn't just a family squabble, it was the start of something that would burn through every lie Daniel ever told. And I'll never forget the sound of his laughter echoing in my ears that night, because it's the sound I would one day silence in front of the same crowd that once mocked me. The bourbon burned my throat as I swallowed, and for a moment I let Daniel's words hang like smoke in the room. Let him think he'd won the night, because the real poison of betrayal isn't in the papers signed in some lawyer's office. It's in the way your own blood leans back and laughs while the walls you built collapse around you. And as he raised another toast, I caught Emily slipping away to the kitchen, her eyes downcast, the weight of silence between us heavier than the glass in my hand. So I followed, past the chuckles, past Aunt Linda whispering to her friend about how I'd never made it big. And I found Emily by the sink staring at her phone, scrolling the family chat where my humiliation was already multiplying. And she looked up with that tight expression I'd only seen once before, the night I nearly lost her after a layoff when I drowned myself in whiskey, instead of swallowing pride, and she whispered, "Mike, you can't let him own this. Not like this." And I told her without words that I wouldn't, not this time, because something inside me was already shifting from shock into calculation, and when she pressed her phone into my palm, I saw Daniel's follow-up post, a smug caption paired with a picture of the pecan pie balanced in his hand like some kind of crown. Sweet victory never tasted so good. And the comments below from old friends, coworkers, even his golf buddies, all laughing at the joke, made me bite down so hard I tasted copper, and in that moment I realized the pie wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a weapon he'd sharpened publicly, a way of branding me as the family failure for everyone to see. But what he didn't understand was that the same digital stage he mocked me on would one day become the place where his downfall played live. And I slipped Emily's phone back, kissed her temple, and walked out like nothing had touched me. Because the secret to revenge is letting your enemy grow comfortable in the spotlight. Because only when he's blinded by the shine does he fail to see the cliff under his feet. And as the night stretched into clinking glasses and stories were told, I sat in silence, listening, mapping every weakness, every ally Daniel thought he had, every cousin who leaned too close to his laughter, every aunt who nodded a little too eagerly, and I thought of something Dad used to mutter when I was a kid working on cars with him in the garage. A man's real cracks don't show when he's struggling, they show when he's celebrating, and though I never understood it then, tonight I did. Because Daniel and his victory glow was showing me every seam I would pry open, every flaw I would exploit. And by the time the night ended and Emily and I climbed into the truck, the cold air biting, the headlights slicing across the driveway where Dad once taught me to throw a baseball, I had already decided the first move. Wait, watch, let Daniel choke himself with his own rope. And all I had to do was keep my rage chained tight. Because anger is a wildfire, but patience is a scalpel, and I needed a scalpel now more than ever. So as we drove home, Emily finally asked, "Do you have a plan?" And I said, "Not yet, but I will." And my voice was so steady, she gripped my hand again like she believed me, and that night in bed I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, hearing Daniel's laugh echoing until dawn. But instead of breaking me, it carved me sharper, and when morning came I sat at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold, scrolling through the online records of Dad's estate, noticing small things no one else would, dates that didn't line up, signatures that looked a little too smooth, a clause buried in the contract about transfer of the business that required annual compliance reports. And I knew right then that maybe the will was ironclad, maybe Daniel held the paper crown. But even kings fall if you find the right law to pierce the armor, and my chest tightened with a grim kind of hope, because maybe I wasn't powerless after all. And as the days passed, I started gathering threads old receipts I'd kept, contracts buried in desk drawers, emails Dad once forwarded me when he was too tired to respond, scraps of paper that seemed meaningless but weren't, because revenge isn't built on fury, it's built on detail. And every detail I found was another brick in the wall I was building against Daniel. But I didn't let him see it. No, when he invited us to his housewarming party to show off the estate's lake cabin as his own, I smiled, told him we'd be there, because sometimes the wolf has to walk right into the sheep's pen just to make them believe he's harmless. And that night, Emily touched my arm before we went in, whispering, "Don't lose yourself in this." And I promised her I wouldn't, though deep down I wasn't sure what part of myself I was holding on to anymore, and inside Daniel was louder, drunker, prouder than ever, handing out slices of pecan pie like communion, smearing my face with every bite, and when I watched him offer a piece to Emily with that smirk curling his lips, I realized the battle had shifted from inheritance to something rawer, something primal, because humiliation breeds hate faster than greed ever could. And as the laughter swelled again, I thought one clear thought above the noise. When betrayal rots the roots, the tree must fall no matter how tall it stands, and that truth settled over me like armor, because Daniel had already set fire to the roots of this family, and I wasn't going to watch it burn without pulling him into the flames. The cabin smelled of cedar and fresh paint, Daniel bragging about renovations as if he'd lifted a hammer himself, and I trailed behind him with a beer in hand, nodding at his stories while memorizing every corner of the house I used to help Dad fix when storms ripped shingles loose, because there's a special kind of fury in watching someone strut on ground you bled for. And it hardened in me as his friends crowded around, clapping his back, taking selfies in front of the fireplace, while I quietly slipped my eyes over the mantel where Dad's old hunting rifle used to hang before Daniel replaced it with some glossy abstract print, erasing history the way he tried to erase me, and I thought then that revenge wasn't just about reclaiming what I'd lost. It was about dragging Daniel's mask down in front of the same crowd that crowned him, and the plan I'd been nursing began to take sharper shape as I watched him stumble, drunk and overconfident, into a story about Dad's business dealings that he shouldn't have shared, bragging about bending tax codes about creative accounting, words that made the room laugh but froze me inside. Because what he didn't realize was that half of them were recording, phones out, faces glowing blue in the cabin light, and every slurred confession was a fuse burning toward the pile of receipts and compliance documents I'd been collecting in silence. And I sipped my beer, steady, patient, because predators don't pounce when the prey is strutting, they wait until the prey dances too close to the cliff. And by the time the night was done, I had screenshots already flying to my phone from cousins who thought it was funny, videos saved of Daniel swaying with his bourbon glass, slurring about loopholes and the genius of hiding money offshore, and my chest thrummed with that dangerous satisfaction, the kind that makes you want to strike too soon, but I forced myself to wait, to breathe, to catalog it all. Because the cleanest revenge isn't the loudest. It's the one that looks like your enemy's own hand pulling the trigger. And in the weeks after that party, I turned into a shadow at my own job, clocking hours at the office by day and scouring estate documents by night, finding every slip Daniel made, late filings, inconsistent signatures, ignored compliance clauses, and with each discovery my grip on fear loosened, replaced by a grim thrill, because this wasn't about luck anymore. This was math, law leverage, all pieces slotting together like gears in a machine, and I knew the moment that machine roared to life, Daniel wouldn't even hear it until it ground him under. And yet beneath all that fire there was still Emily, watching me with eyes that asked if she was losing her husband to obsession. And one night when she caught me staring at a stack of receipts like they were scripture, she whispered, "Mike, promise me when this is over you'll still be you." And I wanted to promise. I tried, but the truth stuck like glass in my throat because I wasn't sure who I'd be after Daniel fell. And maybe I didn't care. Maybe all that mattered was that he felt what I felt that night in the living room, powerless, small, exposed, and when Emily finally fell asleep, I stayed awake, scrolling through the videos again, watching his drunken boasts frame by frame, and at 3 a.m. I drafted the anonymous email that would be the first crack in his kingdom, attaching one clip and sending it not to the IRS yet, not to the newspapers, but to one of Daniel's own business partners, whose name I'd pulled from the estate filings, because nothing rots trust faster than doubt planted inside a man's own camp. And I hit send with a calm so deep it scared me, because it felt less like action and more like gravity, inevitable. And sure enough, 2 days later, Daniel called me, voice tight, asking if I'd heard any rumors. And I smiled into the phone, playing dumb, listening to the panic bleeding into his tone, and I knew then the noose had started tightening, thread by thread. And the best part was he didn't even know my hands were the ones pulling it. And as weeks rolled on, the rumors spread, small cracks widening, clients questioning his numbers, partners canceling meetings, and Daniel grew sharper, meaner, calling me late at night just to spit insults, blaming me without proof, and though I never admitted anything, I let just enough silence hang in my answers to feed his paranoia, because fear eats faster than proof ever could, and when he finally exploded at Mom during Sunday dinner, screaming about loyalty and betrayal, the whole family saw what I'd been waiting for. They saw the cracks he couldn't hide anymore. And in their stunned silence, I caught Emily's gaze, and she saw it too, the shift in the room, the slow unraveling of his crown, and I almost pitied him then. But pity is a luxury men like me can't afford. Not when the wound is still raw, not when the laughter still echoes. And so I sharpened the final piece of the trap, filing away documents into one clean, irrefutable package of fraud, lies, and betrayal. Saving it like a blade, I'd slide between his ribs at the perfect moment, because timing is everything, and I knew exactly when that moment would come. His big press event, announcing the expansion of Dad's company, broadcast live on local news. The night Daniel would finally crown himself in front of the whole city, and the thought of it made my pulse pound slow and steady. Because if there's one thing I'd learned from this, it's that revenge isn't about anger at all. It's about patience so sharp it cuts deeper than any rage. And when betrayal turns patience into a weapon, even kings bleed like everyone else. The night of Daniel's big press event arrived wrapped in January cold, the kind that cuts through coats and makes every breath sting. And as Emily and I walked into the glassy downtown hall, I felt the hum of cameras, reporters, business partners, buzzing like flies around a carcass they didn't know was already rotting, and Daniel stood on stage in his tailored suit, chin high, teeth flashing like a campaign poster, shaking hands, laughing too loud, and I watched with a calm so deep it felt like someone else's heartbeat inside me, because tonight wasn't about rage anymore. It was about inevitability, and when the mayor stepped up to introduce him, I slipped my hand into my coat pocket, thumb hovering over the phone that held everything's screenshots. Receipts, recordings, contracts, every blade I'd honed for this moment. And as Daniel launched into his speech about family legacy and building on Dad's vision, I tapped send, firing that digital package into inboxes of reporters, regulators, and partners all at once, like pulling a pin from a grenade. And I leaned back, listening to his words unravel even as they left his mouth, because the phones in the audience began buzzing, heads turning, reporters whispering, eyes widening as files opened, videos played, numbers didn't add up, and Daniel faltered for the first time. Just a crack in his perfect rhythm. But it was enough. Because once doubt spills into a room, it spreads faster than fire in dry grass. And then came the twist I hadn't even planned. One of his partners stormed the stage mid-speech, phone in hand, shoving it in his face, shouting questions about offshore accounts and falsified signatures, and the cameras pivoted, the microphones caught every word, and Daniel stammered, sweat beading, trying to laugh it off, but the roar of voices drowned him. And in that chaos, I saw Emily's eyes widen because she knew this was it. This was the moment everything cracked wide open, and I thought it couldn't get sweeter until the catering staff rolled out dessert trays, pecan pie slices glistening under the lights, and I swear fate itself was mocking him, because the pie had become his symbol of victory, and now, under the cameras, with his kingdom collapsing, it was placed in front of him like an executioner's blade. And I couldn't resist. I stepped forward through the crowd, lifted a slice, raised it high, and said loud enough for microphones to catch, "Sweet victory, right, Daniel?" And the whole room froze for half a heartbeat before the laughter exploded. Not at me this time, but at him, savage and hungry, because everyone saw the irony, everyone remembered his posts, his jokes, and he knew it, his face crumpling as he shoved the mic away and tried to shut me down. But the chants rose louder, cameras flashing, reporters swarming, and in that storm, I felt the final justice land. Not just in the files exposing his fraud, not just in the contracts that would hang him legally, but in the humiliation of the same symbol he once wielded against me, turned back on him at the peak of his pride. And as he lunged toward me, security held him back, the cameras capturing every desperate thrash, every spit-flecked curse. And the videos went viral before I even left the building, my toast replayed with captions, memes flooding the same feeds where his smug pie photo once mocked me, the digital stage now his gallows. And though I should have felt triumph, what I felt was heavier, darker, because watching your brother unravel isn't just victory, it's loss too. A reminder that blood ties cut both ways, and as Emily and I slipped out into the cold night, I carried that weight with me. The noise of the crowd fading, the city lights hard and bright, and she asked in a whisper, "Was it worth it?" And I thought of Dad, of the deck at the lake cabin, of every laugh turned against me, and I finally answered, "It had to be." Though my voice was rough with something closer to grief than gloating, because revenge doesn't stitch wounds, it just makes sure the one who cut you bleeds too. And as we drove away, I knew the fallout would be brutal lawsuits, indictments, family fractured beyond repair, but Daniel's crown was gone. Shattered on live TV, and my secret advantage, the patience I carried like a hidden blade, had done what fists never could, and though I'd won, I knew the scars of betrayal would never fully fade, because when trust dies in a family, it doesn't come back. It just haunts you in quieter rooms. And the lesson I walked away with that night was plain enough for any man to understand. When your own blood betrays you, the only justice worth having is the kind that makes them face themselves in the mirror, and you don't need to swing your fists to bury a man, you just need to let the truth do the work. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us share more true stories like this.